I changed how I spoke, dressed, even breathed, just to avoid his anger. I did not realize how much I was censoring myself until I finally left. Here is how the fear crept in and how I got my voice back. I was standing in the kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning, holding my breath so the floorboards would not creak under the weight of my own existence, feeling the cold, clinical tiles against my bare feet like a judgment from the house itself. The house was silent, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, oppressive stillness that seemed to vibrate with the hundreds of unspoken rules I had spent months painstakingly memorizing. A set of invisible, razor-sharp tripwires that governed my every move, my every word, and eventually my every thought. I was staring at a half-empty glass of water on the counter, paralyzing myself with a single, agonizing question that looped through my mind in a frantic, exhausting circle. If he wakes up and sees this glass here, will it be the proof he needs that I am fundamentally careless, lazy, and fundamentally disrespectful of the home we supposedly built together? To anyone else, it was just a glass. To me, it was a potential detonator, a physical catalyst that could ignite a 3-hour lecture on my character flaws or a week-long cold shoulder that made the very air in the house feel like ice. That is the exact moment I knew I had lost the war for my own mind. I was no longer a human being living a life, but a curator of survival in a high-stakes museum of his moods. I had meticulously changed how I spoke to remove any trace of challenge, how I dressed to suit a specific aesthetic approval, and even how I breathed, shallowing my inhalations so as not to disturb the fragile peace of the room, just to avoid the flash of his unpredictable anger. I was curating my very presence to fit a narrow, suffocating mold that was never meant for a human being to inhabit. I did not realize how much I was censoring my own soul, bit by painful bit, until I finally left and heard the beautiful, terrifying silence of a home where no one was judging my every move, where a glass on the counter was just a glass. I remembered the way my heart would hammer against my ribs if I accidentally dropped a fork, the sound echoing like a sharp crack in the sterile environment he demanded. I had become a ghost in my own life, drifting through rooms I paid for, terrified to leave a trace of my humanity behind. Every morning was a performance for an audience of one, and every night was an audit that I was destined to fail. Here is how the fear crept in, like a slow rising tide, submerging my identity before I even noticed the water was above my chin, and how I finally fought my way back to the surface to get my voice back. The first months were a technicolor dream, a cinematic masterpiece designed specifically by a master architect to dazzle my senses and lower my psychological guard to the point of total vulnerability. I thought I had found the one person in this world who finally understood the depth of my ambition, someone who did not look at my drive as a threat to be managed, but as a partner to fuel it into something legendary. We were not just dating, we were building an empire together, or so he convinced me with his magnetic, unwavering confidence that felt like a sanctuary in a chaotic world. By our third week, he had already picked out the specific linens for the master bedroom of the Italian villa he insisted we would buy by the next year, describing the morning view of the rolling vineyards with such vivid detail I could almost smell the sun-warmed grapes and feel the Mediterranean breeze on my face. He spoke about our future children as if they were already walking and breathing, giving them names and mapping out their elite education before we had even shared a dozen quiet meals together. He painted pictures of holiday gatherings and family legacies that felt so real I could see the candlelight reflecting in the silver. It felt like a whirlwind, a beautiful, high-speed dream where every desire I ever had was being handed back to me as a promise. I thought I was being chosen for my inherent worth, finally recognized as the special person I always hoped I was. But the reality was darker, a trap laid with gold-plated bait. I was not being chosen. I was being bought with a currency that did not exist. While he was describing the grand legacy we would build, he was constantly asking me to cover dinner, handle the rent, or pay the utility bill because his substantial funds were allegedly tied up in a high-yield investment that was always just about to vest or clearing through escrow. I realized later that he was living a billionaire lifestyle on my middle-class salary, using my hard-earned money to maintain the mask he wore, to impress me while telling me I was investing in our future. This is the buy now, pay never scheme, a psychological Ponzi scheme where the victim provides the actual labor, capital, and emotional support, while the perpetrator provides the intoxicating, addictive fantasy. He was using my deepest aspirations, my need for security, deep love, and a lasting legacy to buy my total, unquestioning compliance in the present moment. He mirrored my desire for safety and reflected it back to me so brightly that I became functionally blinded to the fact that the current reality was crumbling beneath my feet. Every time I tried to bring up a real pressing issue, like why he spoke to me so sharply, devalued my contributions, and demeaned me in front of my closest friends, he would pivot with the precision of a stage magician. He would look at me with feigned disappointment, making me feel small, ungrateful, and crazy, and say that I was focusing on petty, mundane things when we were in the middle of building a glorious life that people would envy for generations. He made me feel like the villain for wanting to talk about the electric bill when we were supposedly destined for greatness. He was writing checks on emotional funds that had not cleared, and I was the one working overtime, emotionally and financially, to keep the bank account afloat while he took the credit for the grand vision. I became a master of the quiet, a professional at disappearing in plain sight within the cold walls of my own relationship. I felt that familiar, icy cold dread in the pit of my stomach every single time I heard the key turn in the front door lock, bracing my body and mind for whatever version of him walked through it. The hero who needed praise, the victim who needed soothing, or the judge who needed a target. I would check the tilt of his head, the tension in his jaw, and the way he dropped his keys, searching for the invisible signal that would tell me if I needed to be the cheerleader or the scapegoat that evening. I lived for the adrenaline rush of his drama, the extreme highs and low lows that felt like electricity, because normal, healthy relationships had started to feel monochrome and boring by comparison to this chaotic fire. I did not realize that my nervous system was being overwhelmed, mistaking cortisol spikes for passion and survival instincts for chemistry. I took a twisted, secret pride in my sacrifice, convincing myself that my endurance was a sign of a once-in-a-lifetime love that required great struggle, rather than a sign of slow, agonizing erosion of my self-respect. I felt indispensable because I believed I was the only person on earth who truly possessed the strength to manage his volatile moods and truly understand his complex pain that no one else was allowed to see. I was the keeper of his secrets, the one who saw the vulnerable boy beneath the monster, which made me feel powerful until I realized it was just another leash he used to keep me from running. I thought I was being the ultimate supportive partner, the rock he needed to reach his potential, but I was actually just an unpaid, high-stakes employee in his ego factory, working for the promise of a bonus that would never come. I was the one introducing him to influential people, polishing his reputation in the professional community, and painstakingly smoothing over the bridges he burned with his arrogance and lack of empathy. I was constantly apologizing for him, explaining away his cruelty as passion or stress to anyone who would listen. I did not have a self anymore. I had a function to serve, a utility to perform. I was seeking to recreate the golden cage of my childhood, desperately believing that if I was just perfect enough, quiet enough, and helpful enough, the storm of his personality would finally pass, and the man I fell in love with during those first technicolor months would return and stay forever. I was addicted to the version of him that did not exist, serving the monster of his creation just to keep the ghost of the prince alive in my mind. The turning point was the night the mask did not just slip, it shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces that could no longer be glued back together by my desperate, bleeding hands. We were at a gala he had insisted we attend, where he had been holding court all night, telling exaggerated stories of his achievements to a group of investors. He was publicly called out at the table by someone who actually knew his history and held the real receipts, exposed for a massive, structural lie he had told about his professional background, his credentials, and his past financial successes. The silence that followed was deafening, a physical weight in the room. It was undeniable, documented, and deeply humiliating for anyone witnessing it. I stood there, frozen, feeling the collective embarrassment of the room wash over me like acid, watching the people he had been charming slowly step away. In that moment, I saw the total, catastrophic collapse of his false self, and it was a haunting, primal sight that froze my blood. It was not just a tantrum, it was an internal, nuclear explosion of shame that disabled his entire personality. He did not just get mad, he became a hollow shell of a human being, devoid of the charm he usually wore like a second skin. He went into a visible zombie state, staring through people as if they were glass, his movements mechanical, jerky, and detached from the room. His eyes went cold and vacant, losing the warmth he used to manipulate others, and he looked visibly disoriented, as if the physical world he had invented had just ceased to exist under the harsh light of truth. He looked small, pathetic, and volatile all at once. His words became a salad of nonsense, a desperate, frantic attempt to rewrite history in real time, gaslighting the entire table at once. And then came a terrifying, heavy silence that felt like the air had been sucked out of the room by a vacuum. I realized then that witnessing his shame, being the one who saw him unmasked and broken, made me his greatest enemy and his primary threat. To survive the embarrassment of me seeing him fall from his self-appointed pedestal, he had to erase my validity entirely. I was no longer a partner to be comforted or a confidant to trust. I was a witness to his fraud who had to be eliminated from his life story to protect his ongoing delusion. The rage that followed in the car ride home was a harmful, quiet thing at first, a simmering toxic heat that filled the vehicle. Then it became a roar, designed to blast my memory of the dinner party out of existence. He turned the blame on me, accusing me of not defending him, of wanting him to fail, of being in on the conspiracy. I realized with sudden, piercing clarity that if I stayed, I would be the collateral detriment of his internal disintegration, the person he would use to absorb the shame he could not handle. He would destroy me just to feel powerful again, blaming me for the very reality I had quietly witnessed. I had to reclaim my voice from the wreckage of that explosion, piece by piece, word by word, until I could speak without shaking. I started by focusing strictly on the here and now, the cold, hard facts of the present, refusing to look at the shimmering, promised someday he used to keep me trapped in a cycle of false hope. I had to deconstruct the fantasy brick by brick until I was standing in the mud of the truth, seeing the relationship for exactly what it was. I stopped listening to his grand, sweeping visions of the future and started judging the relationship strictly by the observable data of what was actually happening at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I stopped writing checks on emotional funds that had not cleared in years and likely never would. I started micro-testing his reliability in ways he did not notice, tracking the consistency between his words and his physical movements. I started asking simple, direct questions and watching the rage flare when he could not answer with a lie. When he said he would call at 5 and did not, I did not make an excuse for him. I did not tell myself he was busy or stressed or that I was being too demanding of his time. I marked it down as a clinical data point of his true character, stripping away the narrative of the busy genius he used to excuse his neglect. I started seeing the pattern of broken promises not as accidents, but as a roadmap out of the fog. I detached my own dreams, my career path, my sense of home, my daily happiness from his participation, realizing that my life had been on a permanent hold for a ghost who never appeared. I began to invest in myself again, taking classes he mocked, seeing friends he loathed, and rediscovering the parts of me he had tried to bury. I decided that if I wanted a future worth living, I would build the plan to do it without him, ensuring my foundation was made of solid, unshakable stone, rather than his empty, airy promises that dissolved upon the first impact of reality. I stopped being the mold that held his fractured identity together and started being the person who stood on her own 2 feet, finally looking at the exit door with a sense of clarity instead of paralyzing, cold fear. If you are walking on those same fragile eggshells right now, fearing the sound of your own voice and the weight of your own footsteps in your own home, I need you to know that the floor beneath you is not nearly as fragile as you have been led to believe by the person who benefits from your fear. You have the weight, the right, and the strength to stand firm. You are the one with the real power in this dynamic, because you are the one holding the entire structure of his ego up with your labor, your money, your patience, and your silence. You are the pillars of his temple, and you have the right to walk away and watch it crumble without you. But you must strengthen yourself from the inside out to prepare to walk away safely and decisively. Recognize that you might be addicted to the chemical rush of the narcissistic cycle, the trauma bond that makes healthy, stable, and predictable love feel boring for a while as your body detoxes from the constant state of high alert. That is okay. Your nervous system is simply in survival mode and needs time and safety to reset to a state of peace. You have been running a marathon in a cage for years. Build your autonomy piece by piece, like a complex puzzle of your true, vibrant self that was hidden away under the floorboards. Start that separate bank account he does not know about. Secure your legal documents. Keep a log of incidents that you hide far outside the house. Reconnect with the family and friends who truly knew the person you were before you became a ghost in your own house. They are often just waiting in the wings for you to reach out. Recognize the hard, clinical truth that saves lives. He does not love you for who you are as an individual. He loves the utility, the awe, and the secondary supply you provide to keep his fragile, empty ego inflated. You are a mirror to him, meant only to reflect his perceived glory. You are a utility to him, a tool to be used and eventually discarded when the mirror cracks. But you are a brilliant, complex, and deserving human being to the rest of the world that is waiting to welcome you back. If you ever witness that moment of internal collapse, that visceral mortification when their mask breaks and the monster underneath is exposed to the harsh light of day, do not try to soothe them. Do not offer your shoulder, your understanding, or your pity to fill the void he created. Do not ask them what is wrong or try to work through it like a normal relationship obstacle. Your pity will only register as your superiority in their warped, shame-filled mind, which increases their internal shame and fuels an immediate, instinctive need for war to restore the perceived power balance. They will strike the hand that tries to comfort them because it proves they were weak enough to need it. The only safe clinical move is distance. Immediate, unwavering, and absolute distance. Remove yourself physically and emotionally before the explosion reaches you, because they will burn the house down just to hide the fact that they were crying. They will damage your reputation to ensure no one believes the witness to their collapse. It is almost impossible to recover a relationship once they view you as the witness to their deepest, most humiliating shame. You can never go back to being the person who did not know. Your safety and your sanity depend entirely on your exit strategy and your refusal to engage, not your ability to fix a hole that has no bottom. Stop pouring your precious life into a vessel that is designed to leak. I stopped walking on eggshells the day I realized I could just walk out the door and leave the shattered shells behind forever for someone else to sweep up. I did not owe him a clean exit or a final explanation that he would only use to manipulate me one last time. I did not need his permission to exist, to speak, to breathe fully, or to be happy, and neither do you. You are not a supporting character, a prop, or a mirror in someone else's tragic drama. You are the lead of your own life story, and you finally have the pen back in your hand. You have the right to a home where you are not afraid of a glass on the counter, where you do not have to shallow your breath to keep the peace. If this story sounded a little too familiar to you, if it felt like I was reading the hidden, tear-stained pages of your private journal back to you word for word, then it is time to take your life back into your own hands. You have the dormant strength to do it, even if you feel like you have been silent for far too long to speak up now. The silence is where your strength has been growing in secret. We are all here to support each other and help each other see the objective truth behind the smoke and mirrors of dark manipulation. You are not alone in this fight, and you do not have to live in the suffocating, lonely quiet anymore. The world is much larger, kinder, and louder than the small world he built for you. Take one small, defiant step for yourself today, even if it is just as simple as leaving that water glass on the counter and walking away without a second thought of fear. Reclaim the space in your own mind. If you found this story helpful and feel a spark of recognition that you needed today, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our community where we share the tools for long-term recovery and strength. We are a collective of survivors, and your voice belongs here. Stay strong, keep your eyes wide open to the patterns, and remember that you are worth so much more than the supporting role you have been forced to play in a lie. You deserve to live fully, brightly, and loudly in the light.